Hello, my name is Kevin Probst. I am coming to you from West Central Georgia, from my classroom, and I would like to share with you today some thoughts about how perceptions of America have changed since 9/11. Our friends and our enemies have a different perspective of just who America is since that fateful day in 2001 when our world changed forever. I was teaching a high school history class on that Tuesday morning in Duluth, Georgia. A teacher across the hall suggested that I turn on the television and watch the news because something was happening in New York City, something really crazy. My students and I watched, and they asked questions that I could not answer. And when we watched the second tower fall, we knew that this was no accident, that it was an attack. I felt a numbness, a preparatory antidote for emotions that would flood my soul. Americans tried to process the information throughout that day and evening, and we all awakened the next day knowing the attack had initiated a change in our world, and that we were unable to comprehend at that moment the effect of that change. It seems impossible that it was nearly a quarter of a century since that day. The United States embarked on what would become a perpetual war on terrorism. On September 20th, 9 days after the attack, George W. Bush, our president, addressed a joint session of Congress. And he told them, whether we bring our enemies to justice or bring justice to our enemies, justice will be done. From that time forth, Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden were words that were familiar in every American household. President Bush seemed to be forecasting perpetual war when he said, "Our war on terror begins with Al-Qaeda." But it does not end there. And it will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated. In the 2 decades that followed, thousands of Americans died and trillions of dollars were spent. And the attempt of the Bush administration to convert Islamic authoritarian nations that had been defined by religious and cultural beliefs for thousands of years seemed a bit far-fetched. Attempts at nation building failed, and that failure tarnished our reputation among our allies and our enemies, as America earned a reputation for being a warmongering nation. In 1998, the U.S. Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, in an interview on the Today Show with Matt Lauer, presented the United States as a unipolar superpower nation responsible for policing the world. If we have to use force, she said, it is because we are America, and we are the indispensable nation. Well, America's vulnerabilities have been exposed, and we have fought multiple wars that failed to put W's in the win column. And after our embarrassing withdrawal from Afghanistan, the idea of being an indispensable nation has been shattered. In this 21st century, competition for global hegemony looks more multipolar, where measures of power are shared by multiple countries, rather than unipolar, where the United States dominated, or bipolar, where there was competition between the United States and the USSR. The growing distaste for military force among American citizens is shadowed by Russia and China's veto power in the United Nations Security Council. Whereas previous administrations realized the importance of maintaining a wedge between these two countries, it seems the Biden administration has successfully assisted in making them BFFs, best friends forever. They will team up on the Security Council to vote down any diplomatic efforts suggested by the United States that would not benefit them. Important questions must be answered. If the United States is no longer in a position to police the world, and other nations and terrorist groups intend to use war as a means to alter the status quo and compete for wealth and power, what or who will prevent ensuing global chaos? What force stands in the way to prevent a dictator from using atomic or chemical weapons? Who steps in to prevent the more powerful nations from bullying the weaker nations while confiscating their mineral resources or genociding their minorities? Will the radical religious vigilantes in the Islamic world be given free rein to abuse those who refuse to comply with their demands? I remember struggling to understand why American leftists were saying the terrorist attack of 9/11 was America's fault. They argued that the attack on America's financial capital was a message from the Islamic world condemning our greed and our unwillingness to share our wealth. Of course, they were suggesting the solution to all this was to redistribute wealth, especially to Islamic nations, and then all the world would be well. A new atheist movement was birthed by 9/11. Atheists and radical Islamists shared a common enemy, America's Christians. Nothing brings you together like a common enemy, David Foster Wallace. These two groups were in agreement that America was responsible for 9/11, but the attack was also used as fodder to feed an infectious hatred in a frenzied fraction of our population. They found our devoted dedication to a monotheistic God despicable. George W. Bush gave placating speech following the attack on the Twin Towers. It is certainly unfair to Muslims if we don't distinguish between common Islam and radical Islam. However, Bush's declaration that Islam is peace seems to contradict the Islamic Quran, which teaches violence and encourages murder. Surah 3, 151, we shall cast terror into the hearts of these who disbelieve, those who are non-Muslims. Surah 2, 191, and kill them, those non-Muslims, wherever you find them, kill them. Such is the recompense of the disbelievers, the non-Muslims. The Bush administration unveiled its signature piece of legislation in 2001, the Patriot Act, providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism, the Patriot Act. The careless mindset of the common American was, I have nothing to hide. I'm willing to sacrifice my constitutional rights to a government whose intent is simply to protect me and my family. And so the Patriot Act gave the U.S. government the power to unlawfully surveil its citizens in the absence of probable cause. Our financial records and transactions can now be monitored. Our phone conversations can be recorded, and our internet activity can be tracked. This government's power grab was subtle and complete and made possible by playing on the fear of the American people that was a result of the terrorist attack in New York. Another massive, successful governmental power grab was achieved 20 years later as millions of cowering Americans sequestered in their homes, petrified by fear of an invisible virus. Too often, the temporary solutions that empower the government to respond to a crisis become permanent, and the government will never, ever give up the power it has. Thank you.